Hi, welcome back to the Watch Insider. My name is Brian. This is Tim. And thank you guys for logging on. We've got an exciting show for you today, filled with Basel picks, this or that, watches on the wrist, and everything else that you guys like and enjoy. So we've had an exciting week at Basel. Before we begin, I would just like to give a special shout out to the entire production crew behind the scenes. I don't know if the viewers are aware, but Watchbox and many of our shows were recently featured in the New York Times on the front page of the watch section during the Baselworld Fair. So it was very cool. Big ups for the guys in the background here who you guys don't really get to see, but are really responsible for making this whole thing happen. So thank you guys in the back for doing what you guys do.
So that's right. New media went to old media, and we're celebrating this. All things considered, guys, it was a huge week. Our Basel coverage was top-notch. The one thing we missed was actual on-the-floor experience with the show itself. We're going to fix that today.
Yeah.
Your questions for Brian, by the way, live, interactive, field them. I'll be manning the chat box tonight, flying wing.
Yeah, and guys, please, if you're interested, we cannot get you the Rolex Pepsi at the moment. So we're gonna start with that. So why don't we start with a what's on the wrist?
All right. Let's fire it up. This is one that is best seen and heard. This is my Grand Memovox. You saw it last night on Watches Live, 41 millimeters, platinum, 250 pieces, proof that blue has always been in style with dials. This is a lovely piece that's an alarm and a perpetual. It's the IWC Kurt Claus system. And, I'm perfectly happy with a solid caseback when said solid caseback is made of platinum.
So here I actually have a customized watch. It's an NHC. For those that don't know what NHC is, it is a Vincent Calabrese, who is a very famous watchmaker responsible for producing watches for many of the large brands. This is a complication that he's very much known for is the jump hour. This is a customized blue dial with a G in the center. Generally, this watch has his logo, which is like a form. I guess it's an N with a...
It's this.
Yeah, it's that. So it's basically that right there. That's in the center there on the other side. But he put a G on the front for me, and it just happens to be, one of my favorite watches. I'd say it's as niche as I get, as far as I get in my collection. My dad actually has this watch in rose. I took it in steel, and I just think it was a great execution of the watch.
It's great when you've got your logo on the dial and the watchmaker's logo is on the back. I'll say this, guys. Nouvelle Horlogerie Calabrese, a co-founder of the AHCI. These watches almost all retail for under $10,000. They're highly customizable, and again, along with Sven Anderson, a co-founder of the AHCI, that puts him in good company, along with guys with names like Carrie, Philippe, Franck, and FP. So this is a great brand to get into if you're into high horology and independence, but you don't have an FP Journe Philippe Dufour budget or patience for their wait list.
Yeah, exactly. So it's actually for what he's responsible for producing, it happens to be a quite a reasonable price point, and it's actually very easy for other watchmakers to work on, which is another reason why I really like the watch. Is if something does happen, I'm not going to feel like sending it back to Switzerland to get fixed, but it's definitely something that our in-house makers can really.
And that I promised you the Memovox. That's what that sounds like. That was their first caliber with a hanging bronze gong, so they could actually get resonance rather than a cricket chirp. All right, tonight, questions, questions, questions. We need Tim at Basel 2019. Done, I promise you. This year was my year to go to SIHH. I didn't feel on doubling up. I thought we could do more from the studio, and sure enough, we have. So let's fire off the first of the night's watches. Brian, you pick our poison.
Yeah, so... Well, I have I guess the this or that we did, I mean, really we can just talk about all these watches, I wanted to do sort of a brown dial theme. Okay. I don't think brown dials obviously get a lot of love. I think it's sort of like the underrated dial in the watch space. But you have a lot of watchmakers now that are utilizing it. And in particular, we talk about FP Journe a lot and his Havana dials. But I wanted to bring in three very different watches from three very different makers with three very different looks to sort of discuss, the pros and cons of each, and then ultimately what your pick would be and what my pick would be.
Okay, so let's start off, because we mentioned FP. Let's put the man himself up on the screen. Okay. Tell us what we're looking at, Brian.
So here we are looking at a 40 millimeter platinum octaloon with a Havana brown dial. So the Havana series came out, was it
2 years ago.
2 years ago, in various editions. So you have the Lune, you have the CS, and then there was one other. And you know, it's very hard to get a good feel for the watch in pictures because you really can't appreciate just the coloring of the brown. But it was a small production run only for that year. And I think that this is the best execution of the watch because of the way that the blue of the moon phase plays off of the brown dial. And you know, if anybody follows us, they know just how much we love FP Journe, and you know, this watch is no exception.
Also worth mentioning, with this particular dial, you have a unique execution of brown that is not overtly sunburst or metallic. Most of the brown dials you're going to see have a distinct metallic tinge to them. This one has a warmth and a glow, but it's not an explosive sunburst. It's not a metallic grain. It's difficult to describe. I would almost say that the best comparison would be Swiss milk chocolate. That's the impression I get in person. So unique, needs to be seen to appreciate, but that's true of most watches from FP Journe. Just take my word for it, this is a special watch.
Yeah, and I think that when you look at the watch in pictures, the brown looks a lot more dull. But when you get it under the light and you look at it at different angles, you know, you see differences in the color. Yeah,
and I'll give you a little bit of an insight into what I'm talking about with the metallic dials. Here we have Patek Philippe 5140 rose gold. You can see that's distinctly a sunburst. As I move that around, that does things that the Journe dial does not do. Now, as we approach Easter, I'm thinking of Easter baskets, so chocolate's the first thing that comes to mind here, but it's also a different reactivity. There's something about a dial that has a gentle, warm tone to it as opposed to a spectacular splash of light. And this is a completely different take on the brown dial. In fact, if you want to see the most innovative takes on brown dials in the last 2 years, it's been Journe with the Havana dial, and then again with the Holland and Holland.
Mm-hmm. So, you know, the 5140 happens to be one of my favorite executions of the Patek Perpetual. So this watch was recently discontinued in favor of the 5327, which is now a larger watch. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but it now has Breguet numerals as opposed to the stick markers. This was sort of Patek's mainstay ultra-thin gentleman's perpetual for a really long time. They produced it in all of the different metals with many different dial configurations. You know, you had the rose with the brown dial, platinum with the black diamond dial, platinum blue, you know, platinum gray. So, you know, they've really, I'd say, exhausted many of the configurations. This, to me, though, flew under the radar. And I think that now, as you look back, this is the kind of watch that, you know, really strikes home as a special piece. And believe it or not, the sizing of this watch for me happens to be better than the 40mm Octolune. So, you know, gun to my head, if I had to choose one of the two, I would actually probably be choosing the 5140 rose here.
Yeah, when I was in the Navy, they told us about that, you know, how that might happen. Someday someone's going to put a gun to your head in a prison camp and ask you to choose between several perpetual calendars from Patek Philippe. What are you going to do at that moment, Denson? What are you going to do at that moment? But the bottom line is that I think we found that you can have very different takes on brown dials. Mm-hmm. We've got more, but we're actually going to go to our live chat real quick because we have a question from Adam J. Odell. Tim, even at $45,000, do you think that the Patek Philippe 5522 limited to 600 still has investment potential? I'm going to give you the quick background on this, and then I'm going to take Brian's answer. This was a watch that came out at the Grand Exhibition in 2017. It was a New York special edition of 600 pieces, time only, a 324 caliber with a grained blue navy dial, steel case. This is a watch that was made exclusively for the U.S. market. 600 were made. Think of it as the time-only companion to the 5524G. Now, Brian, is 600 too much, just enough, or too little?
So I think
45 grand was his specified price too.
So I think that 600, you know, if it was a different brand, would be a lot. But for Patek, it's not very much. You know, as we saw for, you know, the 175th anniversary, they produced editions of well over 1,000 pieces for some of those watches, and it just got sucked up. 600 pieces for a single market can be a lot, but as we know, some of these watches, you know, moved to other parts of the world. They traveled. So, you know, they had wings and they flew. I think that, you know, this watch, or the market for this watch, brings to mind for me right now, similar to the Snoopy, where, you know, you had a major surge in the beginning as people were trying to get the watch, and then it sort of settled, where they were, you know, where they were available online at different prices, and there were quite a few of them. And the price dropped as a result. So I think you're seeing that a little bit right now. You're seeing the price of that watch come down a little bit just because of availability. I think that as the available watches in the market start to diminish, and it dries up and you see fewer and fewer of them available, you'll then start seeing a few every blue moon pop up, and I think it's going to cause the price to rise back up again. Now the Snoopy is probably a $25,000 watch, and I remember not 2 years ago you were struggling to get 15. So I wouldn't be surprised if this watch continues to rise. You know, you've got Steel, you've got Patek Philippe, you've got Pilot. I mean, it's a combination that's hard to beat.
And it's a very clean dial. I defy you to find another execution of the 324 automatic that just has 3 hands, hours, minutes, and seconds. Try to find one without a date. Not easy to do. Now, here's the other thing. Consider that for the 5070, they were able to make about 250 per year per medal, and 5070 prices are pretty stiff. Considering there are a lot more of those out there than the Steel 5522, I think you're safe. If you buy at 45, might there be a period when you're maybe $2,000 underwater compared to your purchase price? Sure, but if you buy and hold for, let's say, 5 to 10 years, I don't think there's any way you lose there. Now, I did see an interesting question from Rich Buddy. Tim and Brian, is it a good time to sell my Hulk and Batman, so a Rolex green Submariner and a GMT in steel with the black and blue bezel, to upgrade to a Patek? Now, Brian and I disagree here. I think the Patek Nautilus market's a bit more inflated than the Rolex market. They're both hyped. I think one's more hyped than the other, but I want to hear your perspective on that.
So, you know, if you break down the numbers, Patek Philippe is probably producing between Nautilus and Aquanaut around 6,000 odd watches per year. So, which is, you know, if you take a brand like, you know, Audemars Piguet or Rolex, the Royal Oak and Offshore is a large percentage of the 40,000 watches that AP makes. So in relative terms, Patek's really not making that many sports watches for the level of demand that there is. Rolex is probably producing anywhere from 800,000 to 1 million watches. So for a brand that's producing that many watches, it's actually a phenomenon what's going on. I think that, you know, you've got a period right now where the best of the best product is at an all-time high. So in particular, you have a Hulk, you have a Batman. Neither of those watches is currently discontinued. You know, they're still technically, you know, in production. So I think that if you were to sell those watches, you're selling those watches at what is a perceived high to get into a Patek at another all-time high. Now, if you're telling me that you're looking to purchase a Calatrava or an annual calendar or something that is not quite a steel sports watch, now very well could be a good time to do that. That being said, you've got 2 watches there that if you wait a little bit longer and they do discontinue those references, that'll be the time in which to maximize your, you know, your overall selling power, and then hopefully wait a little bit, maybe the market cools on Patek, and then you buy at the right time. So, you know, for me, those 2 pieces right now, I would say it's a hold.
Okay, that's probably good analysis. Plus, you know, it's more fun to have a collection sometimes. I wouldn't take 2 watches and turn them into 1 watch unless you really love that 1 watch. Okay, so we've got a brown dial theme that is going on tonight, and I'd say it's time to bring in Audemars Piguet. We've talked about FP, we've talked about Patek. Let's venture outside the bounds of Geneva to the Vallée du Jeu and consider what a Audemars Piguet chronograph 39 millimeters in steel looks like with a tapisserie dial in brown with orange accents. This is a really special piece too.
Yeah, so this watch is a watch that we've talked about a lot on the show. It's the 39 millimeter Royal Oak Chrono. I have the same watch with a navy blue dial. I can't say enough good things about the reference. For me, it's the perfect size on my wrist. This was one of the last iterations of the watch. This was when they were producing the, you know, the panda dial, the blue dial with the orange accents, and the brown dial here with the orange accents. This was at the very end of the cycle when everybody was calling on the brand to produce larger references. So this was right before you saw the increase in size to the 41 millimeter. At the time, this was a slow mover. This was the watch that would have sat in your showcase for a year with nobody looking at it. And what's amazing is this is when you know, in today's market, you now look back and you look at this watch and you say, holy crap, this watch is amazing. You know, you've got a almost, I don't even want to say vintage because it's not a vintage watch, but you've got a resurgence now in demand for the 39 millimeter. You have the fact that it's not overly old. You have a specialized dial, and you know, it's got a really unique look. It's got a lot of character to it. It's off the beaten path for AP, and I think that it really checks all the boxes. And, you know, is this going to be somebody's everyday wear? Probably not. But is this a watch that somebody can have in their collection, rotate into, and it's going to get a lot of, you know, a lot of compliments? You know, I think that's going to be the case.
So this was the end of the 39s. Of course, 2012 was the changeover year. That was the year we saw the, I want to say, the 26320. This is the 26300 that we have right here. And as Brian explained, this was the build-out model for the 39mm steel chronograph. In so many ways, the specialized versions with more color and character on the dial are the ones to own. In the long run, that's always the safer bet. Now, of course, this watch being relatively new in the canon of the Royal Oak, this is a crisp case, a crisp bracelet. They're the ones to buy, both because they're the best built and because, in general, these are the ones that have been rarely, if ever, refinished. You go back to 1997, 1998, and you start talking about chronographs that have been around the block. It's always best to buy the newest in the best condition with the fullest accessory and documentation set, and this watch is exactly that. Plus, the engine is a high-performance machine. While the offshores are all modular chronographs, the Royal Oak chronograph itself has always been a Frederic Piguet 1185 integrated vertical clutch column wheel operation. So when you combine that with the standard of the finish you get on the case, the bracelet, and the dial, which is still made on a 19th century pantograph, there's a lot of value here, and I'm going to break a little bit with Brian. I think you could wear this watch every day. Is it your, office-safe Rolex sub? Probably not. You may raise some eyebrows if, you're the junior associate and you wear this into the partner's office, but all the same, 39mm handsome steel and a sports watch. It should be welcome in any company, in any attire. I'm also going to give you a little wrist shot here because I think this is the kind of watch that needs to be seen with scale for perspective. The 39 was a perfect size. You can see that does not wear like a 39. Brian, would you agree that these wear a little bit larger than their nominal size?
I think so. So, I probably, if you were looking at this watch and you're looking at the newer version of the watch, which is 41mm, I would say that this actually probably fits closer to a 41, and that the 41mm version probably sits a little bit closer to a 43.
I would agree with that too. The new 41 with the full bracelet, the integration, the width of the case, the spread of the lugs, it feels to me like it's almost an offshore. Like in everything but thickness, the 41, if you can wear a 42 offshore, expect a very similar fit for the 41 Chrono. So these are great because, again, this is basically the size of a Rolex 40 on your wrist, maybe even a little bit bigger. Yeah.
So we've got a little bit of chatter going on in the chat right now just regarding the discontinuation of the white gold Pepsi in favor of the new blue dial, and what's that going to do to the overall market? If that's not the question, guys, chime in. But I'll sort of just give my synopsis on what I think. I think that one of the interesting things that happened, which some people may not realize, is that Rolex updated the GMT movement for the new Pepsi watch. However, the white gold Pepsi with the blue dial features the older movement. So, it's not unlike Rolex to not, they'll throw away cases, they'll melt cases, but one thing they don't do is they don't get rid of movements.
That's correct.
And, I think that you're going to see now them using the remainder of these older movements in this white gold Pepsi with the blue dial. So one of two things is going to happen. Either this is going to be a short production run while they get rid of all the remaining movements, or they're then going to transition into the newer movement for the same watch. So one of two things. Either way, I think that the white gold Pepsi with the blue dial could end up being, this first run of them could end up being a really cool reference to have, because you're either going to have a short production run with the movement, or you're just going to have a short production run in general, because they're, they like ending on a bang, they like ending with upward momentum of the watch, and I think that it was a smart move on Rolex's part.
I'm also going to say I think that's the one to own. Remember, with Rolex, it is not and has never been about the movement. Unless you're buying something like a 4113 or a Zerograph that is all about the movement because they only made 12 of them and only 8 have ever come up for auction, that's the only time movements matter with Rolex. Rolex is about the dial, the case, the bracelet, and the bezel. And in this instance, you're looking at a very special watch that looks the business and is going to be exceptionally scarce, both because production will be low and because pricing will be high. I would expect that this is a surefire collectible watch, and I rarely say that about watches that are sold new out of the dealer's case. So if you have the foresight and the funding to opt in, I would definitely get on that list if you have any inclination or notion that you might want this watch.
And there's been a lot of comments too that they're going to discontinue the Batman, which, again, honestly, I think nobody knows when it comes to Rolex what's going to happen one way or the other. But if I was, just trying to forward think what would happen, I could see a discontinuation of the Batman in favor of probably not this coming year, given that it was the Pepsi that came out, but I could see them discontinuing the Batman in favor of a Coke bezel GMT, because you would then have the Pepsi on the Jubilee, and then it makes way to have another brand new GMT Master with the new movement with an Oyster bracelet, which so you would have the Pepsi on the Jubilee, you'd have the Coke bezel on the Oyster, you'd have best of both worlds, and you know, it's a nice way to transition out of the Batman.
I also thought that it would be great, and this is pure speculation, I have no privileged information on this front. I thought it would be great if, for the sake of historical purists and perhaps a non-super case option in the GMT family, if something approaching the old 16700 GMT Master came back, a true 24-hour hand GMT that you calculate using the bezel as opposed to a true dual time, a slightly lower price point but constrained production to keep it special, so effectively a one-time zone watch that goes back to the original 1954 GMT with the bezel used for the calculation of the second time zone. A slimmer case, slimmer lugs, a Coke bezel, possibly, and I wouldn't rule this out, but possibly some sort of special dial like the original white dial Pan Am Executive Edition to launch this GMT Master revival, and then make it a regular production with the black dial. I think there's room for a junior GMT.
Could be, yeah. So, real quick, Watch Yoda. You mentioned the Pepsi going for 5 to 6 over list. I actually think that it's going to be going for well more than that. You know, based on what I've heard, the production and delivery of the new Pepsi is going to be on par, if not a little bit more, than where the Daytona ceramic currently is. So, I wouldn't be surprised if it's a double retail piece around 18,000.
Absolutely. Now, we're just for reference, guys, the Daytona retails for about $12.5 US, and we've seen them routinely selling for over 20.
Yeah, so it's about a $21,000 to $22,000 watch now. But I want to get to some of our Basel picks. That way we can discuss them. Why don't we get the first pick up? So these are my picks, best watches of Basel. Obviously, you know, tried to narrow the list down as best I could. Without greater ado, shocking, obviously we have the new Pepsi. I really don't know. There's not much that needs to be said for the watch. I think that, you know, commercially it's going to be probably one of the best watches of the year. You have a integrated Jubilee bracelet. You've got a new movement. In particular, the new movement's around 15% more efficient, and it takes a 48 power reserve up to a 70-hour power reserve. So overall, it's a better movement, beautiful execution of the watch. You know, people are going to be selling their kids in order to get it. So
the question is, once you've sold your kids to get this watch, do you have an enterprising dealer who might order you an Oyster Link or all of them?
So no. So don't want to spend too much time on this because you guys probably know everything there is to know about this watch. So why don't we move right ahead to pick number 2. So pick number 2 is the new Oris 65 that they came out with. Stainless steel case, black dial with a bronze bezel, now in 40 millimeter. So it was moved from 42 to 40 millimeter. For me, personally, a much more wearable size. They came out with it in 36 and 40. Oris is doing great things. They hit it a few years back with the Carl Brashear and the vintage-inspired watches, and I really think that they're starting to gain traction. I think that they're slowly transitioning out of some of the Aquas pieces and some of those bigger, bulkier pieces that were 4,000 or 5,000. Yeah. They've gotten to a much better price point at that $1,600 to $3,000 price point. And you know, this watch I think is going to be another winner. You know, they're doing a lot of bronze watches. The bezel on this watch is bronze, but you know, it's a very subtle detail. It almost makes it seem like it's a two-tone watch. And it's got a $2,000 price point, which I think is you know, incredibly reasonable and inviting. And you know, you can get it on this strap here. You can get it on a rubber strap, which happens to be very comfortable. And you know, I just think that you know, Oris as you know, an independent, I like seeing the independent succeed, and I think that they're doing a great job.
So, yeah, a few more things just on this model. We love it because it's a 40. It's also a 36. A couple of things that set this one apart is that I think Oris is now realizing, you know what? we could be Tudor for about 40% less money. They're releasing this thing on a rivet bracelet. You can actually get it on a steel rivet bracelet.
Exactly. So they're doing great things. I think they're doing great watches at great price points. And I think that while a lot of other brands get a lot more of the attention, this is the brand that watch guys should be looking at. And I think that you're gonna continue seeing great things for them to come. Interestingly enough, you know, when you think about value retention, the Carl Brashear bronze pieces are actually selling at retail, if not a little bit over retail. So, you know, you can really see that some of the limited editions that they're doing are really catching on.
And they made 2,000 of the Carl Brashear, so those are still hot items. They're objectively beautiful watches. And like Brian said, this is a great way for a guy who might be inclined to the two-tone look to wear two-tone without the stigma.
Exactly.
Because this isn't gold, it's bronze.
Yeah, exactly. So, great watch and, you know, hard to beat. I think you're going to continue again seeing you know, cool things coming from Oris. Third pick here, and then maybe, you know, this sort of talks a little bit about what's going on in the chat. We'll blow this up. So somebody in the chat mentioned, you know, about the sort of the success of independence right now, and I really think that, you know, the success of independence, and I'm not really going to use. You've got two types of independence, right? Audemars Piguet is an independent. Patek is an independent. F. Journe is an independent. So I don't think that that's what most consumers look at as an independent. You know, I think a lot of the guys that think independent, they're thinking De Bethune, they're thinking Laurent Ferrier, Vaudeline, and a lot of, you know, smaller guys, much smaller production. So the success of these smaller brands, I really think is tied to the economy. You know, I think that when you have a lot of money out there, the economy is good in pretty much all parts of the world. That's when people start spending money on independence. You think to yourself, wow, you know, Laurent Ferrier came out with a $58,000 annual. The watch happens to be gorgeous, beautifully executed. I'm going to take a shot on it. You know, when things are in the dumps, you know, that's when guys start moving back to only wanting to be in, call it Tier A, Patek Philippe and Rolex brands. So the independents are tied to the, you know, I think to the economy. This one right here was probably a knockout for me. It's a brand that we just picked up at the show. De Bethune right now is producing about 100 watches per year. The quality is, you know, top notch. And one of the factors that I look at when we're looking at new brands or what's going to excel a brand to the next level that really gets it to catch on is when you see that watch across the room, do you know what it is? And I think when it comes to De Bethune, you know. And the Stradivarius here is a new watch that got released at the show. It presents the Milky Way on it's a highly heated titanium dial, which gives it that blue look. It's the same treatment that they do on their blue cases. I want to say you treat the titanium to around 800 degrees, and then it gives it that high polished blue look. So you can actually, on this watch...
Can we go full screen again on this one?
Yeah, let's go full screen. So, you know, it's presented on the Milky Way, but you can actually have it personalized for a birth date of a child, your own birth date, on what the stars look like, you know, at that particular time. So it's coming in at around 60,000 CHF for, you know, while expensive for, you know, that happens to be quite reasonable for a De Bethune. It's a 42 millimeter case, which is new for them, a little bit smaller, a different case shape here, you know, a bit, you know, more form fitted to the wrist. It's high polished titanium. Honestly, like, I freaking love the watch. I think that if I was gonna, you know, invest in one right now, you know, I don't even want to call it invest because I don't necessarily think it's an investment. But that being said,
money spent on pleasure.
Money spent on pleasure. This would be the one that I would buy. I just think that the watch was an absolute knockout.
Yeah, and I would agree with that, guys. Keep in mind, this watch with a 6-day manual wind power reserve and a balance, a hairspring, and an escapement of their own design is 8.8 millimeters thick. The Royal Oak Jumbo, the extra thin, that is a 8.3 millimeter watch. So this is a lot of watch in a very compact titanium package. I would also throw this out there right now. The independents that are hottest, MB&F, Richard Mille, FP Journe, Laurent Ferrier. Well, let's see. Laurent Ferrier and FP are watchmakers. Richard Mille is a businessman, and Max is an engineer who got into marketing. Why are those brands successful? Because the brands successfully market a personality that backs the brand. You look at the independents that struggle.
The brand beats from Switzerland. It beats to somebody.
The other thing is with brands that are not successful as independents, the De Bethunes of the world, the MCTs, the Cabestans, we love them. Why Have they not succeeded?
Well, Debithen beats from Denny. But I think
they don't market him.
They don't market him, though. So he's one of the greatest living watchmakers. But, you know, I think that, you know, the brand has now gone under, it has new leadership now, new owners. Denny is obviously still very much involved with the brand and is one of the owners of the brand. And I think that you're going to see Debithen take off. I think that right now at 100 watches per year, they're bringing the price points down. They, you know, they cut the price points by a lot, so it's now a lot easier to get into the brand. The workmanship is amazing. And I just think that at 100 watches per year, it doesn't take that much to sell. I mean, I feel like I could sell 100 of them.
No, they're fantastic. Again, it's the brands that are not succeeding on the independent side are not marketing their life force, the personality that drives them. Denis Flageolet is one of the best watchmakers in the world. What does he need? Quiet, time, and money to do amazing things. You've seen the Zenith Dayfi Lab with a mechanical resonator at ultra-high frequency. Debithen had that technology in 2012. What do they need? They need Three-Stone Capital money to make it work. Now they have that. Pierre Jacques is on there. He's back as CEO to run the business side. Denny's going to get to work. I think we're going to see world-shaking developments from this brand.
Yeah, so great things to come, which of course we'll continue to update you guys as those happen. Pick number 4 is, you know, right up our wheelhouse, one of my favorite brands. We have a Patek Philippe 5270 Platinum. We're going to get the picture here. We're going to get that blown up. So 5270, in-house Patek Philippe Perpetual Chrono, one of the mainstays of the brand, has been out for many years now, many different variations, chin, no chin, different dial colors. We finally have the collector's dream, and I think that this is the watch that will stand as the turning point for this watch. This is going to bring up the values of all the watches that came before it. You have a platinum case, salmon dial with Arabic numerals, just a beautifully executed watch that is already, you know, called one of the talks of the show. Very few pieces are going to be shipping. It's going to be very hard to get. My gut is that in the secondary market, this watch will probably be trading it over retail. And again, I can't say enough good things. The watch was even more beautiful in person than what it presents in photos. And, you know, I think that this is the watch that Patek Philippe collectors have been waiting for, you know, from the brand of this model. You know, they came out with the 5970 with the salmon dial for the London exhibition in 5 pieces. Collectors all over the world really love the combination and wanted the watch. And, you know, lo and behold, they came out with it here. And, you know, what's really nice is they're going to keep this extremely limited. It's going to be very hard to get. And with a retail of around $190,000, it's going to bring up all the prices of all the other watches that came before it. So, you know, you have the new configuration of the dial, which is the same as the, you know, the prior version with the white and blue dials. And, you know, again, I can't say enough good things about the watch.
Yeah, by the way, guys, this now supplants all versions of the 5270 on a strap. There are now only 2 options. You've got the 5270 1R, which is a black dial, rose gold on a full gold bracelet, and you've got this one, the 5270P. Speculation is, just as the 5970P represented the end of the line for that model, those 2 debuts that Brian saw at Basel, the full gold on a bracelet and the salmon dial, might be the build-out, the last model year to model year and a half before they fold this model. And the unfortunate thing is...
Well, you still have a J. We still have a J left.
We still have a J.
We still have a J.
We still have a J. That said, I do believe this is the watch it should have been from the beginning, so you wish it weren't...
I feel like I got a chuckle from the production team when you say a J. They're thinking a different kind of J. I don't even think they know what kind of J we're talking about.
Les jaunes. Okay, so the bottom line is that this is a watch that I think is going to be the first ever waitlisted 5270 since the very first year that the model was on the market.
Well, interestingly enough, and I don't think many consumers know this, is that when the 5270G first came out, it was actually an application piece. So you had to apply to Patek Philippe for the right to purchase the watch. It was very difficult to get, and then I think that they, you know, obviously mastered the movement. It started, you know, coming out a little bit more. It became a core piece of the brand. You know, maybe it sort of lost its way a little bit, you know, until, you know, really until it found this particular example. So, you know, great job. You know, I've got to say, between all of Patek's releases, I mean, it was a collector's dream. I mean, they knocked it out of the park. I mean, between this, you know, the Aquanaut Chrono, the white gold Perpetual, I mean, you know, it's going to be impossible, you know, even getting these watches. So
that's a fact. We're talking about dials with orange accents tonight. Speaking of which, I think that 5968 Aquanaut is going to be the most demanded of the new Pateks. This is going to be a watch that's hard to get, but I think of the watches that will be made in volume.
Or the Perpetual white gold, I think, with the Nautilus Perpetual is probably going to be equally with the Aquanaut.
But like 1/3 the price of the Nautilus Perpetual, I think there's going to be a bigger line for the Aquanaut Chrono.
So so it's definitely going to be very interesting to see what happens when the watches start delivering. But you know, as a Patek AD, I can already say that you know the allocations are going to be very slim.
We have a great question from Ranger Joe. Do you accept Bitcoin?
We do accept Bitcoin. So we've actually have had multiple Bitcoin transactions, and you know, we take it. You know?
Yeah, it's cryptocurrency, but hey, half of cryptocurrency is currency.
Yeah.
So if you've got it, we want it. I can't say we'll always give.
No.
Yeah, I can't say we'll always give you the same amount of watch for your Bitcoin because it's dropped 70%. What, like 3 times since 2010?
Exactly.
So buy now.
So pick number 5 now. So this was a sleeper for me, and you know I think that it is very much an underrated watch, but it really brought the watch back for me. So this is actually the Oyster Perpetual 39. So this watch was released in 2015 with it had like a grayish dial with light blue accents, a grape dial, and you know I think that it was sort of like, you know, guys and girls didn't really know who the watch was made for.
That's a fact.
And, you know, at a 39mm case, it's extremely wearable. It's thin. It's the kind of watch that, you know, it really could just be your only watch.
Hell yeah.
You know, this is one of those examples of a time where Rolex will release dial colors at Basel that blow you away, that gets no press. Like, you don't even know that it comes out until it literally hits the website or it's in a showcase. And they came out with the watch in 2 different dial colors, a white stick dial with sort of black accents, but this is the winner for me. It's a black stick dial, 39mm. This is a watch that at $5,700 is probably going to be one of their best price point pieces for a sports model. And again, I can't say enough good things about a watch, but I really can't say enough good things about this watch. I think that for anybody that's looking to get into the Rolex brand, that's looking to buy a watch that's actually going to be available, this is a winner.
Yeah, if I had pricing in time, this is, for reference, guys, this is the 114300 reference. If I had pricing details on this watch and the white dial version when I put together my sub $6,000 watch feature for the channel a few days ago, this probably would have been the thumbnail photo and the lead-off watch, because this is sensational. This is a Rolex that's almost available for Tudor money, and on the full Rolex bracelet with the solid end links, the milled clasp, the solid center links, the Rolex caliber, and the Rolex warranty, you're still getting the 5-year warranty on this watch. That's a lot for your money and a lot of peace of mind.
No, so I think it's a great option, and you know what? It's a great option for someone that's looking for something that's not quite as sporty as, you know, a Submariner, and while at the same time, you know, the Explorer and even the Air King has a very particular look. You know, they're not ultra classic. You know, I think that this is a lot more conservative, and you know, this is the kind of watch that you know, you can dress up, dress down, you know, a lot better.
Of course, if you're me, you're still going to get the one with the red grape dial, but that's me.
Yeah. But final pick now, pick number 6. Got to have my my Seiko in there. So let's blow this bad boy up. So here we have the Green Marine. So this is a new Seiko, launches a limited edition, 800 pieces. This is a watch that already exists. They really haven't updated the watch except for it's got a new bezel material, and it's the Hunter Green dial. So I think that the color is meant to be an area in Japan where it's like supposed to be reminiscent of the forest, but it's a beautiful Hunter Green. Let's get the picture back up there so people can look at it while we're talking about it here. But it's a beautiful Hunter Green, and you know, it is I want to say a $3,000 to $3,200 price point. And it's just a beautiful diver.
Can we bring back that big green
blow it
watch?
Up.
Blow it up in the The non-violent sense. Okay, so as you can see, this one's technically known as the SLA-19, and it's part of a broad-based Seiko, not Grand Seiko, but Seiko, Prospex family that pays tribute to the very first 300-meter diver from the brand, which came out in 1968. So
real quick, let me interrupt you. It's actually just under 2,000 pieces, not 800.
Yeah, it's 1,968 for 1968. And it's a lovely piece, though big at 44 millimeters in steel, and it's going to wear big. What I really love here is that you're getting a 50-hour in-house mechanical movement. You're getting a full steel bracelet with an extensible clasp that also comes with a silicone strap, so you get accessories. And this is one of the first applications I can think of a special edition, accessibly priced Seiko, non-Grand Seiko, ceramic bezel. It is a green ceramic bezel, which is going to give you far more durability than the ADLC or lacquered or anodized bezels that Seiko and Seiko dive watches have used in the past. So I'd say this feels more like a Tudor competitor than something like a Hamilton competitor or a Longines competitor.
Yeah, and so while not a high beat movement, it's technically, I guess you could consider it sort of an undecorated Grand Seiko movement.
Yes.
And, you know, I think that it is definitely call it a Tudor competitor. As you said, you know, if you're sort of comparing this watch, I guess the Tudor that you would probably compare it to is like a Pelagos.
Yes.
But I think that this watch has a beautiful uniqueness to it. The green is spectacular. It's far better in person than what this picture suggests. I think that it's very much a watch guy's watch, because I think that when you start moving away from Grand Seiko into Seiko, it brings back some of the older connotations of the brand. But
you have to understand the different degrees of quality in the Seiko line.
Correct. And I think that what's happening, though, is Seiko is undergoing a major, major transition and a major rebranding. You know, what we've seen is they're bringing the prospect diver much more into focus, raising the price points or bringing up the price points. They want to bring Seiko back, where Grand Seiko will probably eke up a little bit, and you're going to have watches like this that, you know, they really try and go head to head with the Oruses and the Tudors of the world, the Bell & Rosses of the world.
I would not be shocked if you've seen the Troom line. It got off to a little bit of an awkward start. I'm not sure they're going to stick with that name in the long run, but that was the first like Seiko Epson product as opposed to Seiko or Grand Seiko. I would not be shocked if 5 to 10 years down the line we regard Crador as, you know, the Japanese Philippe Dufour that it is, Grand Seiko as a Rolex competitor, Seiko as a Tudor competitor, and then we see some sort of rebranding of the entry-level watch, that $100 to $800 watch, as something other than Seiko. I love this watch, and quite frankly, the only question I've got left is how do you say Hulk in Japanese?
I have no idea. Hulk?
It's probably la même chose, as they say in French. So, awesome watch, and it's odd to end on a high note with an entry-level watch, but we kind of find ourselves at that juncture.
No, and that's the kind of watch, honestly, that I think that, you know, only 10% of call it like Seikos and Grand Seikos make it to the United States. So of these limited editions, when you have, you know, 1,968 pieces, there's 200 coming to the United States. That's nothing, especially at this price point. So you have to figure that this is why they're getting, you know, swallowed up, because, you know, for our country, you know, most of these are staying in Japan, where the brand is pretty much right behind like Omega and Rolex. So, you know, at this price point, for 200 watches coming into the country, these are going to get sucked up. It's probably going to be an over-retail watch. Like, I think this ends up being around a $4,000 to $4,500 watch when, you know, all things are said and done. But, you know, it's unique, and, you know, you're not going to see anything else like it.
That's a fact. I'll also say this, guys. If there were 2,000 Carl Brashear Oris Divers 65 limited edition models in 2016, and they're still selling at list today, I feel confident, possibly more confident than any other watch we've discussed tonight, save maybe the 5270p, saying that this Seiko going forward will be a safe store of value based on what you pay to buy it new.
Yeah, and we were actually, people are constantly messing with Photoshop online and on Instagram and whatnot, and somebody did a mock-up of what a Tudor Pelagos would look like with like sort of like the Hulk coloring, and it was freaking fabulous. So I don't know, like, if, you know, Tudor, if you're looking at that or what, you know, whatnot, but
please
Pelagos
make this happen
in green, boom.
I will say this, guys, too, and if you need to take baby steps, start with the Pelagos with an olive drab military style green dial.
Yeah.
This is the most talked about watch of last year's Baselworld. I want to do a quick macro of this because this is the now delivering, now available Zenith Dayfi El Primero 21 with its 360,000 vibration per hour second balance. You can see the second balance and the second escapement going in parallel, and a seconds hand, a foudroyant, that measures 1/100th of a second. There's one more thing I have to let you know. I can't tell you. You have to hear it for yourself, and that's the sound of this thing.
Mm-hmm. So, amazing watch. I think this is a testament to the comeback of Zenith. We actually are in the works trying to do a limited edition of this watch. So if it happens, I'll show you guys mock-ups, but it's really going to be something special. I think that they knocked it out of the park with this watch. They know that they knocked it out of the park with this watch. And I think that you're going to continue seeing good things to come from this brand.
By the way, guys, black ceramic, not DLC titanium right here. Lots of fun, a vocal watch in ways you probably never imagined, the loudest escapement I've ever heard that's not a tourbillon. It looks good, it sounds good, and at, I believe, far under $15,000, the price is right.
Yeah, and you know what? A lot of the critics say that this watch has elements of Hublot to it. When that JCB came online, and that you've got the, call it the gummy crux strap, the big ceramic case. But I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that consumers today are looking for something like this, and that if the same old El Primero Chronos that Zenith was making were going to sell, then they would have sold. But this is what consumers are looking for. You can't beat the El Primero Chrono. It's got a skeletonized dial, a beautifully executed ceramic case, and for the price point, it's hard to beat. Like, look at the value that you're getting in this watch.
Also going to throw this out there, guys. For those of you who are saying that this is an Hublot, remember this: that case shape, the Hublot in its outright dimensions, is still Zenith. History check. A384, A385, early 1970s, Zenith El Primero. Take a look at the solid dial optional version of this watch and tell me it is not the spit-in image. Yeah. So for traditionalists, you still have your options. Yeah. There's that. There's the Chrono Master 3842.
And there's a couple cool older Zeniths that I'm hoping that they bring back. What was the one that had like the bright yellow dial?
The Mango. Yeah, that was the Rainbow. There was a Rainbow Elite.
That's what it is.
There was a Rainbow El Primero.
Which were awesome.
The Mango.
So, guys, I think that's all that we have for tonight. I apologize for cutting you off there at the end.
No, we're good.
But I hope that you guys enjoyed the Basel picks. As always, if you have any questions or there's anything that you want to see on the show, please don't hesitate to email Tim or myself. We are always available. So over the coming weeks, we've got a lot of new content coming that's going to sort of be lifestyle mixed with watches. So, obviously, all feedback is appreciated, but we think that you guys are going to really like it. Again, my name is Brian.
I'm Tim.
This is Tim. This is the Watch Insider, and thank you guys for logging on.